Ratchet & Clank Into the Nexus, or just plain Nexus in Europe for some utterly bizarre reason, was the final outing for the pair on the PS3, and in many ways it served as the final adventure for the entire series, though with the reimagining of the first game that's thankfully not the case. But if this had been the last game, it would have been a fitting conclusion. Dropping all the experimentation with other genres and returning to its tried and tested formula, Into the Nexus catches up with our two heroes as they're escorting a prisoner to a specially designed prison. But when her brother shows up to rescue her, it starts a chain of events that could spell destruction for the galaxy. Despite a shaky start, dropping us off in medias res with little chance to get our bearings before everything goes down, the story ends up being one of the best aspects of the game, dealing with heavy themes like loss, abandonment, isolation, survival, and belonging, all of which drive the characters and the plot, while still managing to find room for the series' trademark humour. The two villains, Vendra and Neftin Prog, both have incredibly strong motivations, and as the game goes on and you learn about their childhood struggles, you come to understand and sympathise with them more than almost any other quote-unquote bad guys in the whole series. You may not know these two at the start of the game, but you really will by the end, and you'll want to know how their story finishes. They're not the only characters, of course. Tolwyn returns after a mysterious absence in the last few games, and her relationship with Ratchet continues to be one of the most interesting aspects of the series, being equal parts playful and sweet.
Ratchet! I'm dying!
No, you're not.
Oh, fine. You know, you laughed the first time I did that.
Seeing her here really does make one wonder why they kept leaving her out of the series. It wouldn't exactly have been hard to include her, and having a female playable character would have been nice and inclusive, but there I go with my SJW nonsense. Hashtag sarcasm. Gameplay-wise, it's a return to formula, being a proper over-the-shoulder shooter once more, though compared to, say, the future series, there's something ever so slightly off about how this one controls. It's not a deal-breaker by any means, but the time away from this style of gameplay, and Into the Nexus using a different game engine, means that the jumping isn't quite as smooth, and the combat doesn't feel quite as refined as in earlier games. Again, far from the biggest problem, and it doesn't take long at all to get used to, but it's a shame it couldn't quite match the refined polish of the earlier games it's trying to resemble. That said, it is still fun running around shooting bad guys and exploring levels, and the new mechanics introduced in this game are, for the most part, good additions. The most obvious is the gravity mechanic, which have long been a staple of the series, with gravity boots and such, being given a much bigger focus this time round. There's sections where you'll be jumping from platform to platform, like a slower version of the hoverboot courses from Crack in Time, and there's also a device that lets you shoot gravity beams so you can traverse large pits and otherwise inaccessible paths. These are fun, but often feel underutilised, and occasionally shoehorned in just to make use of them and remind you that, hey, these are still a thing. There's also Clank's upgrades, which this time round transform him into a full-on jetpack. These sections are rare, but are also a huge amount of fun, allowing you to engage in aerial warfare and make your way around huge areas. I'm glad these sections return in the new game, because they're brilliant, and they never fail to raise a smile whenever the game let me do it. Clank's other role in the game is to enter the Netherverse, an alternate dimension where the laws of physics work differently. These take the form of 2D platforming sections where you need to change the flow of gravity to navigate through the area, and are probably my least favourite part of the game. The gravity shifting mechanic can get pretty confusing, and the levels don't feel as refined as the rest of the game. They're not bad, just not as good as the rest of the game. Visually, this is as good as the PS3 games have ever looked, and the darker yet still colourful art direction not only fits the plot, but also helps the game stand out amongst the others in the series. Unfortunately, this art style isn't consistent. After around 4 planets worth of beautifully gothic and oppressive worlds, the final location ruins it all by being on a bright, sunny world. It's hugely jarring and incredibly out of place, and it feels like the developers put all of the lights into the level on full just so they could test it, and then forgot to adjust them back. It makes for a very bizarre final level that should be gripping and epic, but just feels like a normal day. Finally, the game's too short. There's only really 5 levels, not including Clank's, and by the time you've whizzed through them all, you'll be left wishing there was more. This is partially by design. The game was intended to be another mini-adventure like Quest for Booty, albeit a bit longer than that. But still, a level at the beginning where you actually help capture the bad guy would have solved both this issue and the odd info dump opening. That said, if one of the only real problems you have with the game is that there's not enough of it, it must be doing something right, and Into the Nexus does indeed do a lot right. It's flawed, sure, but it's still a fun little experience that returns to what the franchise does best, and served as a nice potential finale for the series. Whatever the future holds in store for these characters, I'm perfectly happy ending this particular story here.